In this lecture, we'll be starting with a new module of shear. So, as you know that in this limit state of collapse, we have completed the flexural part. Now we'll be starting with the shear part, right? So, what is basically why do we study this shear? So, when a load is acting on a particular beam, it will undergo a deflection. Because of the deflection, since in this particular scenario, since bottom part is in tension, there would be tension cracks that would propagate throughout the depth of the beam. These are generally called as the shear cracks, and to stop their propagation, we provide something called as shear reinforcements. These are your tension reinforcements. This bottom one is tension one, the top is the compression one, and these vertical that you see, these are called as just shear reinforcement, or what we have been studied till now, we call them as stirrups. So in this chapter of shear, we'll be studying how to design those stirrups, or how to check what should be the reinforcement that we need to provide for them, right? In a normal bending case, this is a positive flexure, I would say. The top part is compression zone and the bottom part is the tension zone, right? And this is how the bending stress diagram looks like. And obviously we know that the stress is given as m by I is equal to sigma by I. So m into y upon I will give you the bending stress at top and bottom both. Consider these two small elements. One is lying in the compression zone. The name is ABCD for that, and the other one is lying in the tension zone. The name is PQRS. So this is our ABCD and PQRS. Let sigma x be the compressive force, because this is lying in compression, so obviously the force that would be acting on it would be compressive force. So, or even we can say that even the stress that would be acting would be compressive stress, and the stress that would be acting on this would be sigma x, stress or force, whatever. There is a concept called as transverse shear. You might have studied this in your structural mechanics. And the transverse shear is given as SA into Y bar upon IB, where S is the shear force that is coming onto the member. Now this transverse shear is generally, it is a plot for the cross section. Okay, so let's say that the cross section of this beam is a rectangle. Okay, let's say it's a rectangle. So what this transverse shear says that at the top of the rectangle, the transverse shear is 0, and even at the bottom edge, the transverse shear is 0. The transverse shear is maximum at the center where the neutral axis lies. So it is maximum at this point, and how it is given is tau is S, that is shear force coming onto that section, into area into Y bar upon IB. The way how it is calculated is, you have to take small strips, and let us say that this is a area, and then you have to basically integrate. So I won't be going into the detail how this formula calculates that thing. So let's say that this is that area, small area, and Y bar will be the centroid of this area from the neutral axis. So this will be Y bar. I will be the moment of inertia of the rectangle, and B will be the width of that section. So that is how this transverse shear is calculated. And what exactly this transverse shear means is that, let us assume that our beam is divided into small layers. Okay, very small layers like this. And when the bending happens, let's say before the bending, our beam looked something like this, divided into very small layers, very thin layers. Okay, obviously I cannot draw those thin layers very much, but after the bending, these thin layers, what happen? Yeah, obviously I cannot draw it exactly. So this is how, just imagine that this is how the bending takes place. So what is actually happening is that there is some shear between individual layers, okay, and that is this transverse shear what we are talking about. This is not the shear stress that you have been learning, the direct shear stress which is coming due to this load. No, it is also, the other name for this is also bending shear. So during bending, what happens that these layers, they elongate with respect to each other, and there is some shear generated in between them, that is called as this transverse shear. So if you see that at the top there is nothing to produce any transverse shear, there is no layer above this, right? This is the last layer, there is no layer above this, so there won't be any transverse shear at the top, neither there would be a transverse shear at the bottom, because there is no layer below this, so there won't be a shear stress at this junction, nor there will be shear stress at this junction. Correct? So that graph is this transverse shear graph, and the maximum transverse shear will occur at the center. Alright? If you want in detail for this transverse shear, I would recommend you to read some good books on structural mechanics. Fine. So the point that you have to remember here is that the transverse shear at the top edge and bottom edge is 0. So you won't be having any transverse shear there. This is the transverse shear, and since this member is inside, it is not at the edge, so we can safely show that there is a transverse shear there, because at this point we are having some transverse shear, right? This is acting in clockwise manner, this and this one as a couple. To counteract that, we will be having a resistive transverse shear, and that will be acting in the anti-clockwise manner, and because of this this small element ABCD will be in equilibrium. Same way here for PQRS also we will be having some transverse shear. So for this element ABCD, we have the sigma x, that is in compression, and we have this transverse shear. For this we can find the principal stresses, and you might have already studied what principal stresses are, and in your lower classes, and you also know the equation. So the equation for a principal stress at inclined at an angle, let's say for this plane theta, where the shear stress would be 0 and principal stresses would be the maxima and minima on that particular plane. So it is given as sigma 1 2, the major principal and the minor principal stress, which is equal to sigma x plus sigma y by 2 plus minus root of sigma x minus sigma y by 2 the whole square plus tau square. So sigma x here is this, sigma y, that is in the y direction, it is absent, and tan 2 theta is equal to 2 tau upon sigma x plus sigma y. This will give you the principal angle, that is the angle at which the principal stresses would appear. So when we solve this, what we see is that for a given principal stress, the major principal stress, that is this 1 and this one 2, the major principal stress is a tensile force, a tensile stress, and the minor principal stress is your compression stress. So here you see this sigma 1 is your tensile and sigma 2 is compressive. Okay. Now we will come to a boundary condition, that is, we know that this is a transverse shear, and at the edge, that is at the boundary, your tau will be equal to 0. So when we put this tau equals to 0, we won't be having any shear stress, we won't be having any transverse shear stress acting on the element, right? And I am comparing this for both compression as well as tension. So this is the tension element, this is the compression element, and in both the cases, as you can see, even in the tension case, the tau here will be 0 and the tau here will be 0. What exactly those two elements are is, let's say this is that element A, B, C and D, and this is that element P, Q, R and S. So they are like at the boundary, and since they are at the boundary, they won't be having any transverse shear. And please understand that this ABCD and PQRS, these elements are very small elements. So don't come in and say that it has such height to it, so won't the shear stress here would be this. No, those are very small elements, like when we say dx or dy. Dx and dy, we know it is very small length, right? So here in compression and tension case, we have these two elements with no transverse shear acting, because these two elements are at the respective boundaries. For compression case, sigma x is minus sigma x, okay, because it is compressing. We will assume that compression is negative and tension is positive. So sigma x I am taking as minus sigma x. Sigma y is 0. Shear, transverse shear is 0. So the tan 2 theta is given as 2 tau upon sigma x plus sigma y, and when we put this tau equals to 0 here, what I will be getting is tan 2 theta is equal to 0. So theta will be equal to 0 degrees, right? So theta is 0 degrees. When I mean that theta is 0 degrees, it means that this plane is almost vertical. And what would be the principal stress then? Sigma t and sigma c. Sigma x is minus sigma x, sigma y is 0, tau is 0. Again here this sigma y is 0. So what I would get here? I will get, let us solve it, okay. So minus sigma x by 2 plus minus, this would be sigma x by 2. And the first case, that is for the plus case, sigma t will come out to be 0 and sigma c will come out to be minus sigma x, correct? So sigma c is minus sigma x. It means that on this plane we have the principal stresses of only compressive type. So sigma c are acting here on this plane, and this plane is nothing but a vertical plane. So what this statement means, that plane of crack is vertical plane. Basically you should understand that principal stresses are nothing but the angle that the principal plane makes. That principal plane is nothing but the plane of failure, or at that particular point the shear stresses become 0 and cracks start appearing on that particular plane, right? So at the boundary, when the transverse shear is 0, I am getting my theta to be equal to 0. It means at the boundary, what it is saying is that the crack has to be vertical. So we will see that when we come to case 2 tension, sigma x is equal to sigma x, that is positive. Sigma y is again 0, tau is again 0. So when I substitute it here, what I will be getting is sigma x by 2, sigma y is 0 here, plus minus sigma x by 2. So the first case of positive, it will give me sigma t equal to sigma x and sigma c will be 0. So when case 2 tension, when this element is at its boundary, at the tensile boundary, at that particular case the compression stresses are 0. Similarly here, when this element is at the boundary of compression, the tension stresses are 0 and it only has the compression one. So again here the theta will be 0, and this is that element which is not having compression, it is only having tensile stresses, and the alignment of that plane is vertical because it has a 0 degree. So what it actually means is, see, this is ABCD and it is having nearly vertical cracks at the boundary. These lines that you are seeing, they are nothing but the path of your propagation for cracks. So the cracks will start vertical and they will follow this path if they are forming on the compression side, and at the boundary these cracks are only because of the compression stresses. But when we move somewhere else, we can see that now the plane is aligned like this, and this plane will always be tangent to your crack boundary, okay? And you can see, and in this case we are having both. We are having the tensile stresses as well as we are having the compression stresses. Same is with the tensile one also. ABCD at the tension boundary. Sorry, this should be PQRS. It is at the tension boundary, and the cracks are almost vertical here. You can see. So at the boundary we will be having vertical cracks, and then they will propagate like this. So this is the path of propagation of the tensile cracks. And again, these cracks here are only because of the tension stress. There is no compression stress at the boundary. But as we move to some other place, that is here, if you see now the crack is almost horizontal. So now the angle has become 90 degrees. So you can see in this image how the cracks are forming. They are almost vertical. They are starting as vertical, and then they move, or then they propagate into the body of the member. To stop these cracks from propagating further, what we need to do is that, see, these cracks propagate like this. What we have to do is we have to provide shear reinforcements so that this crack will stop there itself. It won't go further. It is important to realize that shear analysis and design are not really concerned with shear as such. We are in fact concerned with the diagonal tension stresses, which is a result of the combination of flexural and shear stresses. So we saw that the flexural stresses, that is sigma x in compression and in tension, this was because of the flexural stress, and shear stress, that transverse shear, was also there. So it was a combination of flexural and shear stress which produced the principal stresses inside the body of the concrete, due to which there were cracks formed inside, and those cracks had a definite pattern of forming. Hence, shear failure is often termed as diagonal tension failure. Behavior before cracking is not affected significantly by shear reinforcements, and they come into play only after cracking. Inadequate shear design is inherently more dangerous than inadequate flexural design, since shear failures normally exhibit fewer significant signs of distress and warnings than flexural failures. So what it is saying is that the shear failure is a diagonal tension failure because those cracks are propagating diagonally, and the behavior before cracking is not affected by shear reinforcements. So the shear reinforcements are only they only come into play when there is a crack that is propagating, and these shear reinforcements need to stop those cracks. So these shear reinforcements are not going to provide you any resistance, any significant resistance in the flexural design of the member, and that is why we have never taken them into consideration while we were designing our flexural capacity of the member, right? They will only be used for this shear, as a shear reinforcement, and for inhibiting those cracks to propagate inside the body of the member. It further says that if we design inadequate for the shear, then that is much more dangerous as compared to the flexural design, because in flexural design we have our steel which is there to give us ample amount of warnings before it actually fails. But in case of shear design, it is entirely dependent on cracks going through the body of the concrete, and if a crack is successfully able to go throughout the body of the concrete, it will fail if the shear reinforcement is not provided, or if it is inadequate. To arrest the diagonal and vertical cracks, we need to provide shear reinforcement, also called as transverse reinforcements, as it is provided in transverse direction of the beam. Due to this, the shear transfer through body of concrete is ensured. So these shear reinforcements are also sometimes called as transverse reinforcement. And why they are called as transverse reinforcement? Because this is the length of the beam, and across the length of the beam we provide these reinforcements, right? They are called as the tension and the compression reinforcement. But shear reinforcement, to get the complete view of shear reinforcement, we don't need the longitudinal direction, but we need the transverse direction, that is the width, and hence they are called as transverse reinforcement because they are spanned in the transverse direction. It helps in enhancing the dowel action of longitudinal reinforcement. The dowel action is that the shear that is coming into the body of the concrete, it is not only the entire responsibility of the shear reinforcement to stop the cracks from going, but even these tension reinforcements and compression reinforcements, they also take some shear. And how do they take shear? They take it by this dowel action. You can see that if this part of the beam tries to come down and this is staying up, this is nothing but your shear action, right? So there will be a small deformation of the tension bar at this particular point, and this tension bar at this particular point will stop this part from moving down, and it will stop this part from moving up or staying in its place. So it is preventing the shear from happening. That is the dowel action of the longitudinal reinforcements. And if we provide shear reinforcement, the shear reinforcements will help the longitudinal reinforcements in reducing the shear force that is coming onto that longitudinal reinforcement. When stirrups are closely spaced, they provide confinement to the core concrete, thus increasing the compression strength of concrete, which will be helpful in locations affected by the arch action. So what this statement says is, it is actually a statement related to the columns, and in columns the stirrups are provided like this. These are your stirrups, and either you provide it like this or you also provide it in a helical manner. So those are called as helical shear reinforcements that we'll be studying when we learn more about the columns. But what these stirrups do in a column is that, since there is a compression force acting on top of the column, if these shear reinforcements are not provided, what will happen to these longitudinal reinforcements? They will buckle, right? Like this, they will start buckling. So there is this arch that is forming if the shear reinforcements were not provided. But because they are provided, they will hold these reinforcement together, and there will be a very strong core that is formed inside the concrete. So this is that core which the shear reinforcement confines. So that is what we are talking about. It will be confining it to the core, or it will provide confinement to the core. So this is that core that we are talking about, and the shear stirrups will provide confinement to it. So this was it for today's lecture. In the next lecture we'll be learning more about shear reinforcements. Till then, take care. Thank you.